Going to start off giving you a little bit of history. The Financial Intelligence Centre Act, or Fica as we all call it, came into operation on the 1st of July 2001. It didn't really change over the years. The Minister made one or two changes to the regulations, but generally speaking, the Act stayed the same. Then in 2016, they brought the new legislation partial into being, where they stopped all, what's the word I'm looking for, the exemptions. There were certain exemptions from portions of the Act, they stopped that. Then on the 2nd of October 2017, the Act per se came into full operation. And we were supposed to be ready by that date, but we weren't. The industry itself was not ready. No one knew what the heck was going on. Even the Financial Intelligence Centre people themselves couldn't tell us exactly what we wanted. They, to this day, have not given us any information as to what they're going to be looking for. All they've said is that when they've done the Fica for the banks, there's not one single bank that has been 100% compliant. So the banks can't get it right, then God help us poor estate agents. But anyway, be that as it may, 2nd of October 2017. However, they gave us until the 1st of April 2019 to get our templates and our working documents in place.
Hence the lastminute.com training.
Hence the lastminute.com, okay, yeah. So that's what we're going to go through. I'll just give you a little bit of information in background continuing, and then we'll look at the documentation, because I think that's probably where a lot of the questions are going to come from. Now, you all know Fica. You all know that in terms of the existing Act, we have to have a compliance officer. Now, who's a compliance officer in your offices individually?
She's in my office.
Okay. And Sarah's in Westville.
Risha's in ours.
Who don't know? Who doesn't know what who their compliance officer is? Oh, I'm amazed you all know. You ask the agents and they'll go, what's that? So, compliance officer, every office, every company had to have a compliance officer in terms of the original Act. We all had to have a set of internal rules. So as soon as a new agent came into the business, we will give that agent a set of the internal rules. Also, the philosophy of the Fica, of the old Fica, was know your client, KYC, know your client. In terms of the new legislation, there is no longer a compliance officer. What you do have is an RO, a responsible officer, and that is the highest person in that company. So in terms of Tyson's, it will be Chris Tyson. So if anything goes wrong, it's Chris's head on the block. He is the highest ranking officer in Tyson's. However, that does not mean that he cannot delegate the task to somebody else, which he will. Now, the Chris Tysons of this world, they are responsible for their offices, for their branches, for their franchises. So if one of Tyson's franchisees does something wrong, the way the Act is at the moment, Chris is responsible. Now, I have queried that with Rebosa, Heather and I talked about it, and I'm still waiting. They're on to their second set of attorneys at Rebosa to try and find an answer to the question, and they can't find an answer. How can a risk officer or a senior person in one company be responsible for the operations of an entity that is totally separate? You can't do it, so there's a conflict there. But again, that's one of the things we'll have to sort out as the months go by. So, I repeat, no longer a compliance officer. You have the senior person in the company who will be the responsible person. Right, internal rules. There are no longer any internal rules. They've gone. So you can scrap those internal rules, and I'll tell you what they've been replaced with in a moment. And know your client has gone. In their place, we have got the risk officer. I've just told you about being Chris. We have now got what is known as RMCP, Risk Management and Compliance Programme. A Risk Management and Compliance Programme. And this is one of the problems we've been battling, or Heather's been battling over the months. And then, of course, instead of know your client, we've got a customer due diligence, which is virtually the same but far more intense. When you see the depth to which we have to go to verify people's identity, in some instances, it's mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. You'll spend more time doing Fica than you will selling or renting property. So this is the new legislation, risk officer. So you all need to appoint a risk officer with the effect of 1st of April. When you appoint your risk officer, it must be in writing. So for example, Kim's looking at me, I'm going to pick on Kim. I'm Chris Tyson, and assuming I've still got something to do with the Berea, I am now going to, in writing, appoint Kim Woods as the risk officer for the Berea. So if you are in your own franchise from the 1st of April, if your existing person is going to be your new risk officer, then give it to her or him in writing, ASAP. And get them to acknowledge that they have received that letter. In the past, in the old... Sorry? Yeah, get her to sign, that he or she to sign that they've accepted that the responsibility. Because can I just tell you something now, a little bit in the sign? Not only your compliance officer or your risk officer, your agents. Fica is now a legal obligation. A legal obligation. So if Sarah doesn't, let's assume Sarah is one of my agents and she doesn't do something, she is in for a criminal charge. So she says, and you get these agents, they can't be bothered Fica their clients. It is now a criminal misdemeanour not to Fica your client. So you can put the fear of God up your agents. So risk officer, risk management, the compliance programme and customer due diligence are all what have been changed. Now, what are the responsibilities of your risk officer in more detail? Number one, you have to ensure that your employees are trained. Hence, we're all here this morning. And hence, you'll all go back now to your offices and you'll all be imparting this knowledge to your admin staff and your agents. It is up to the risk officer to publish the RMCP and to instruct on the RMCP, which again we are going to do this morning. And again, you can now go back and you can then give that information, that knowledge to your agents. Every single employee, not just agent, employee has to sign that they have seen the risk management compliance programme. So you need to design a letter. We haven't got one already.
There is one
in the pack. Okay, there you are. So every employee must sign that. We'll look at it. We'll go through the pack just now. But every employee must sign that they've seen the risk management and compliance programme. And that is serious documentation, must be kept under lock and key. Now we come to the infamous list 1267. Do you all know what that is? This is a list of hundreds of thousands of suspected terrorists worldwide. So Keegan's standing there with a smile on his face. He walks into me and says he wants to buy a house. I'll say, just hang on, Keegan, let me see if you're on the list. I'm now going to list 1267, and there's 10,000 Keegans there. So I'm now going to... I've now got to sort out if Keegan is one of the terrorists on the list. 2 days later, when we've narrowed it down, and he's decided not to buy a house, I'm exaggerating and joking. But we just check the list to make sure he's not on the list, or your buyer or your seller, your landlord or your tenant are not on the list, and then you can proceed with that transaction.
At the moment, it's a website. You can go onto the United Nations website, which has the list 1267, and I've published a link on the documents folder, so you can just go in there, go on the link, and if you look on the right-hand side, you can type in Keegan's name and see how many Keegans come up.
Sorry, Keegan.
I wouldn't try my habit.
But there are literally hundreds of thousands. Right, another thing the risk officer is responsible for is ensuring the implementation of the risk management and compliance programme. So whoever you appoint in your office must have a little bit of clout and authority to go to the agent and say, come on Heather, I want this, otherwise you're in trouble, no commission. Companies have in the past adopted the ideology of no Fica, no commission. And I think sometimes it's the only way to make agents come into line, but now if they know that it is a criminal offence and they can go to jail for it, then maybe they'll start doing their job. Now, as I said, the risk management and compliance programme is legally binding on all employees. So everybody from your T person up to your MD or your CEO must comply with the RMCP. You've got no option. It is a serious offence not to, which means it's a criminal offence in terms of legislation. It's 5 years in jail, I think, and £5 million fine or something like that. or 5, whatever it is, 5 years in jail, not 5. Did I say 5 days?
You did.
Sorry, 5 years in jail. Now, generally speaking, even though we're trying to put the fear of God up you and make sure that you've got to do this, if you follow Heather's templates, you have no trouble, your agent will have no trouble. Basically, what Fica says, you have to divide your clientele into high-risk clients and into low-risk clients. Now, that's very simple because it says, what is a high-risk client? And it gives you a list. If someone comes in with cash of 25,000 Rand or more on a single transaction, they are considered to be high-risk. Now, if again, Kim's looking at me, if Kim walks in and says, there's my rental of 25,000 Rand, boom, automatically she's high risk. But if she comes in with 24,999, she's not high risk. If someone walks into your offices and wants to buy a house or rent a factory, if they are not a South African citizen or if they are not a permanent resident, they are considered to be high risk. Partnerships, companies, CCs or trusts with no business premises or operations in SA are high risk. So if Joe Blogg Panel Beaters comes in to rent a factory for 3 years, is he high risk or low risk?
Not high.
Because he's got a business.
He's got a business here, he's got an operation here, so he's automatically low risk. Well, depending on other things, he's low risk. It is only where they've got no operation in SA, no business, no premises or anything in SA, they are then considered to be high risk. Or they cannot produce a letter from a secondary accountable institution. Now let me just explain that. Sarah comes to me and she says, Gordon, I want to buy a house. I want cash in bond, I've got 25% deposit, it's in the bank. So we now apply to the bank where she's got her deposit for a bond of 75%. The bank say, okay, Sarah, no problem, we'll give you a bond. Now, Kim is the seller of that property. So Kim now appoints, I'm saying, looking at Kim. We now appoint Kim as being the attorney. Kim, now I'm getting confused. Kim 1 gets Kim 2 to be the conveyancing attorney. How many times is that client FICA'd?
3.
No different. The estate agent does it, the bank does it, the conveyancing attorney does it. That means that we, as an accountable institution, we do not need to FICA that client. I can go to the bank and say, Sarah, you are dealing with Kim Woods, and she says yes. I say, right, can you give us your FICA documentation, please? And they'll say, no problem. They give us a covering letter which states that they have done their RMCP on Kim. And here is a copy of the documentation. Now listen to me carefully. Every single piece of documentation that is required to FICA a client in terms of our side of things must be in that pack that the bank give us or the attorney give us. In all probability, it will be the attorneys who will give us that. If there is any documentation that is missing from that pack, you, the estate agent, have to go and get that singular piece of documentation and add it to the pack.
Could we do it the other way around? Could we become the person that gives it to the bank?
Yes, you could. But I don't think the banks are going to accept that.
They won't accept that.
I'm sure the banks will do their own FICA, and I'm sure the conveyancers will do their own FICA. I'm not quite sure, but we did talk when we first started on this exercise that we would also insist that Tyson agents do the FICA exercise as well. Has that changed, or is that going to be the policy?
No, we're going to still do that.
Okay. So the policy will be that most of you will follow, I presume, is that we will still FICA our client even though we can get that information from the bank or the conveyancing attorney. But
I think the challenge comes when it's the businesses and you have to get in a mountain, like the legal entities, and you have to get a mountain of paperwork. When it's a person, it's generally quite simple.
And it's quite low risk.
Yeah, but when it's a legal entity, it becomes quite so. But I agree, as Kim said, our agents are trained in the current process. Let's just keep it going.
Keep it going, yeah. Right, continue with high risk. If the person standing in front of you to buy, sell, let or hire is a foreign prominent public official, i.e. says, I'm the Prime Minister of Zambia, I want to buy a house in Umhlanga Rocks, he is automatically high risk because he's an FPPO. If anyone that we are dealing with is in the eyes of the risk officer suspect, now various things can make a person a suspect. There may be an innate reluctance to give you information. So they don't want to give you information. No, don't worry about that. Look, I've got that with me right now. You know that there's something wrong, they are automatically high risk. If you never meet the person, you only correspond with them, they are automatically high risk. If they show no concern whatsoever about what these things are going to cost, then they're high risk. I go into Kim and I say, I want to buy a factory. She says, how much? No, don't worry about that. Well, you know, what phase do you? No, don't worry about that. Do you need a loading door? No. Do you need a compounding yard? No, don't worry, things like that. I just want a factory. Then they are automatically high risk. If the answers they give you are evasive, then you need to say, something wrong here, high risk. So holistically, when you look around at the whole scenario dealing with that particular client, if the risk officer feels uncomfortable, then automatically that client is high risk. Now, the risk officer will not normally be face-to-face with the client, it will be the agent. So we've got to tell our agent, if you are uncomfortable, if you think there's something wrong, we declare that client high risk. And the agents, I know, are lazy. The least documentation they have to get and they can get away with, they will do so, but we need to tell them it is a criminal offence. If all the signs are there and they ignore the signs and later on something goes wrong, therefore the high jump. So they have to do their job properly. So that's high risk. Now, what is a low risk client? Well, low risk client is any client that's not high risk. Simple. Any client that's not high risk is low risk. So 99.999% of your clients that you walk through your office every single day are going to be low risk. Now, small range of simple, similar, homogeneous products. We don't have a huge range of products. You either buy a house or we buy a house or we sell a house on behalf of clients. That's it. So most of our clients are going to be low risk anyway, be it a rental client or be it a buying client. They're all going to be low risk. If, as it says on the screen there, the transaction involves two other accountable institutions, then it is low risk. Now, in our case, it involves a conveyancing attorney, which is an accountable institution. It involves the bank, which is an accountable institution. So I repeat, 99.99999% of the clients walking through your doors are going to be low risk clients. Everyone happy on that? There is no such thing these days as an anonymous client. If someone comes in to buy on behalf of somebody else, but they don't want to give you their name, you say, sorry, can't deal with you. We are not allowed under any circumstances to deal with an anonymous client. We are not allowed to, what they call, onboard any information where there is an anonymous client. If you suspect someone is using a fictitious name, the same thing again, you're not allowed to onboard them. That means capture the data. And every client must go through CDD process, which is a customer due diligence. In the old days, know your client. So no anonymous clients under any circumstances. Now, in a lot of cases with low-risk clients, we can do what is known as an abbreviated customer due diligence, a shortened form of it, which is 99.9% of what we're going to be doing. I've already said to you, but I'll repeat it. If a secondary accountable institution has Fica the client, we can take that information if they give us a letter and all the documentation. Told you that, so go quickly. What if the company who comes to buy or rent a factory from you is a listed company, i.e. they're on the stock exchange? Then what? Well, they are considered to be relatively low risk. We will use a questionnaire, which is in your pack. We will need proof from them that their company is in fact listed on the JSE. We'll need a copy of the representative's identity document, so we will Fica the representative who come to talk to us. And we'll need a copy of the resolution from the company authorising him to act on their behalf. Now, I don't know how many listed public companies you deal with, but again, I don't think it's going to be very many. But there we are, that's what we need. It's relatively low risk, we use a questionnaire, we need the proof the company's listed, we need the ID document of the representative and a copy of the resolution. So that's very simple indeed, if it's a listed company. Now, professional partnerships. Sometimes we do get partnerships coming looking for property, be it medical doctors, be it accountants, engineers, pharmacists, quantity surveyors, stockbrokers. Then you have to do a CDD in full, except only on a managing business partner. So if everyone in this room is a partner in White Table, whatever it may be, then Heather is the CEO. We only need to do a CDD on Heather as the senior managing partner. So if Craig and Heather are joint CEOs, we do it on both of them. So it is only the senior managing partners that you have to do the CDD on. And again, it's in your pack. In the old legislation, you had two types of transactions. You had a single transaction and you had a business transaction. A business transaction was one, for example, where we have an account with the bank, and every month our salary or our commission goes into the bank and we pay out our costs. It's ongoing. That is a business relationship. A single transaction is where Craig comes along and he buys a house from me, transfer takes place, and we never see each other again. Single transaction. So a single transaction is one that was not a business transaction. Now it's changed very slightly. In my opinion, you'll see very, very few single low-value transactions, because what they've set the bar at is 5,000. Now, there's a little bit of, not confusion, needs to be queried. It talks about remuneration. It doesn't talk about commission. So we don't know whether the 5,000 round they're talking about is the rental or whether it's the commission we earn. That's being done by the attorneys at the moment. But if a transaction is less than 5,000, it is a single low-value transaction and you don't need to Fica anybody. Now, I don't think we very rarely, if ever, get commissions less than 5,000. Even with rentals, our com tends to be more than that. So I think you might find that in our urban environment, we'll no longer have single transactions. In the rural environment, it might be something totally different. Again, with these abbreviated transactions, with a single low-value transaction, no anonymous clients. You will still have to verify the name and contact details of the person, but you don't have to verify it. So you say, Kim, give me a copy of your ID, give me proof of residential address, thank you, goodbye. In other words, nothing changes. But I repeat, I very much doubt if we will have very many of those. Right, who is going to be who in the zoo? Client walks in and says, I own XYZ Engineering. I want to buy a factory for my business. Who is he? What is he? I'll tell you. He, in fact, is your client. Now, under the old legislation, the buyer was not your client. The seller was your client. The tenant was not your client. The landlord was your client. And Fica said, but they're giving you mandates. So we finish up Ficaing everybody. Now they have defined it specifically. Whoever walks into your office and says, I want to buy that factory for my business, he is your client and shall remain so. Another scenario. I work for ABC attorneys in Johannesburg. I'm acting on their behalf. We're opening in Durban. We want to purchase a small office block. Who is he? Or what is he? He's your client. He has walked into your office and says, I'm acting on behalf of ABC attorneys. I want to buy an office block. He is your client. Now, what are the people in Johannesburg? In terms of the terminology and the legislation, he now becomes your principal. So on the documentation, the guy who walks into your offices and I want to buy, I want to rent is your client. The person who he is representing, in Johannesburg in this case, is the principal. Now we need to know this because there's lots of information we have to get on all these parties. So we must fully understand what and who these parties are. Right, another scenario. I own XYZ Engineering and want to buy a factory for the business. I'm very, very busy. From this moment in time, my senior managing director will be continuing with the negotiations. Who's he? Okay, he's walked into your office. Is he? Don't forget what I said at the beginning. The guy who walks into your office and says, I want to buy, is your client. So, correct. So he is your client, and the managing director who's coming in to carry on negotiations from here on in is the representative. So again, I repeat, the guy who walks into your offices and says, I won't, is always going to be your client. If he's representing somebody in Johannesburg, or wherever, that person in Johannesburg or wherever is your principal. If the client says this person is going to be carrying on with the negotiations, he is the representative of the client. And I repeat, the reason we need to know this is because of the terminology and the documentation we have to fill in. Because we have to fill in on the client, the representative, and the principal. And sometimes we have to go into great detail.
Sorry, can I just ask a question?
You can ask as many as you like.
If a client walks in and says, I want you to sell my house, is he the client?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously you're going to get a buyer who comes in, but that guy, whoever makes contact with you first,
is the client.
On that transaction is the client.
Yeah.
So sometimes it'll be the buyer and sometimes it'll be the seller.
Correct. Okay. Now don't forget, in terms of Fica, they have said, but let me just recap. When Fica first came out, they had the buyer and the tenant as being the client. The Estate Agency Affairs Act was the opposite. It was the seller and the landlord. So the two clashed. There was a hana between the board and Fica, and the board lost the battle, and it became common for both that the landlord and the seller are the clients. But Fica always said that the buyer and the tenant are giving you a mandate to find a property for them, therefore they were also clients and had to be Fica'd. And we've just gone along with that. It's been no skin off our nose to Fica buyer, seller, landlord, tenant or anybody. It's still going to be the same. The seller will always be your client, but the buyer comes in to buy a house, it's also going to be your client. It's just the terminology we use when we're taking out to buy. You're never going to change the real estate industry. The guy who wants to buy a house is always going to be your client. Now, one of the things, and this is going to be the most difficult part of Fica in my opinion. However, it will not necessarily impact on the residential market one little bit. What we as estate agents have to do with a transaction is to find out who the beneficial owner is of whatever it is we're selling or renting out. Now let's make a little story. We've got a company and there are 6 people in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah? There are 6 people who are shareholders of that company. Joe on the left-hand side of my screen, on the left-hand side of your screen, he owns 25%. He's the senior shareholder. The other guys each own 15%. Who would we have to Fica? 25%. Because the new legislation says if a person has got 25% or more, then we have to do our customer due diligence on him or them. So in this particular example, Joe on the left has got 25%, they've only got 15% each, therefore Joe's the one we will go
If there
to.
were 2 that were 25%,
then we do both of them, yeah. Now another little story, starting at the bottom, we've got Company A, and I own 25% of Company A. Company A, I'm going to start again. We've got Company A. 25% of Company A is owned by Company B. Company B is 100% owned by John Doe. Who do we have to Fica? The 25% or the other 6 people who own, or the 5 people who own 15%? You have to follow the money trail. Where does the ownership? Who is going to get the money in the end? And the person at the end, the beneficial owner, is always going to be a natural person. Now, it's quite possible Company B could be a subsidiary of a company in Germany. In theory, we have to go all the way back to Germany to Fica and find out who the beneficial owner is. Tell you guys, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Because we're going to spend so much time trying to get that information, and it's just not worth doing a deal. But that is when you are dealing with, normally it will be commercial industrial. If you're dealing with your company-owned house, then it's normally, people would put it in the name of a company because they wanted to save on transfer duty in the old days. Now it might be in the name of a company because the company bought a staff house. But you can see who the shareholding is, who the 25% shareholder. So even though the Act provides for this, remember that it was done with the banks in mind, not necessarily with little estate agents. So even though we need to know what's going on, we do not worry our pretty little heads about it, because in all probability it's never going to happen. Or I'll say it will never happen. I very much doubt if you'll come across it. I mean, how many houses have you sold in the company name in recently?
More than used to.
Is it?
But not out of every 10 you're selling, probably.
Are the shareholders of that company another company or a person?
Yeah, it just depends. Yeah, no, it's mixed. Yeah, because there's so many houses now in like Howie Road and stuff that are changing to commercial, that now companies are getting the hang of it. So companies are buying it and then when they're trying to sell it, it's.
Yeah, well, if the company's trying to sell, then yeah, you say 25% shareholder, boom, we've got a Fica you, Mr. So-and-so. But again, the documentation caters for it. Now, when the client walks into your office and says, I want to buy a house, I want to rent a house, you say, thank you, Mr. Client, there's a cup of tea, sit down, please complete this questionnaire. So the questionnaires are in the pack, and he'll go through the questionnaire, then you'll sit with him afterwards, and you'll go through, make sure he's filled all the things in, and then you'll do your customer due diligence. Now, when you're doing your customer due diligence, you need to find out what is the nature of the business relationship. In other words, why are you coming in to see me? I want to buy a house, I want to rent a flat, whatever the case may be. Ascertain the source of funds. Let's assume he's coming in to buy a house. Craig's my client over there, and I say, okay, Craig, you're buying for 5 million. How are you going to pay for it? Cash in bond? He says, no, I've got 2 million in cash and I'm going for 3 million rand bond. I say, okay, Craig, where is that 2 million rand? He says, it's with Standard Bank. I say, okay, Craig, where did that money come from? And this is going to be the difficult thing.
And he's going to say, stuff you, it's
Correct.
all going to run.
Correct. Now, Craig now says to me, I got it from an inheritance. I'm going to say, in that case, could I please see a copy of the will? No, I'm not joking.
But
sorry, let me finish, Kim. You have to verify the source of the funds. If he says, I want it at the casino, I say, okay, give me your commission slip from the casino, your winning slip from the casino.
He says it's my savings.
Then that's fine. Then I need a letter from the bank saying that money has been saved up over so many years.
The savings is probably the easiest way to prove that it's there.
Correct.
You get a letter from your bank saying, this is my money. No.
Correct. Yeah.
But the problem is that the man in the street, your Mr. Buyer, is not prepared to disclose us, the agent, his private business. That's where the problem comes in.
I couldn't agree with you more. Could not agree with you more. As she said, as Kim said, he's going to say, get Steph, none of your business. So what we're going to have to do is teach our agents to say, Mr. Buyer. Unfortunately, in terms of the new Financial Intelligence Centre Act, we need to verify where the funds came from. The funds came from. And he said, well, it came from my business. And said, okay, could you please get me a letter from the bank stating that the 2 million rand came from your business deposits?
Before you even start showing him a house, you're supposed to verify. How can you do that? Because you don't know whether he's going to buy and for how much. I couldn't agree with you more. I could not agree with you more.
Look at the positive. Maybe it's a way of cleaning out the rubbish clients from the good ones.
Well, that is one way of looking at it. Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah, but then also if you bank, you go to 4 different agencies, and every single one of them is going to ask you all of that. But then I don't want to buy anything ever again.
Actually, I want to leave South Africa.
Again, there's a positive. Maybe he looks at us and says, I've done this already, I don't want to do this to anyone else, I'm just going to buy through you. I'm just like, if you first, struggling, yeah.
What's going to happen is exactly what happened when Fica first came out, and you were supposed to Fica your buyer and your seller, your landlord and your tenant before you even started doing business with them. We all ignored it. And this is going to happen with this. We're going to ignore all this until such time as the man says, I want to buy, and then you're going to say, right, this is what I need from you. That's what's going to happen.
You are going to ignore it until they want to buy.
Yeah.
Because why do you need to ask all those questions?
But you need to prime him. You need to prime him.
Yeah.
I mean, you consider the show day with this whole questionnaire, sorry, before you enter this house, what is going to happen?
Yeah.
Where's your money going?
That's why I said earlier on, this is designed with the banks in mind. It's not designed with the estate agents, as you quite rightly say, it's your house. Now, legacy clients. Clients you've already got on your books as of the 1st of April 2019. So from the 1st of April, all legacy clients must be treated as new clients. So even though you've Fica them in the past, you are going to have to re-Fica them. If you've only got half the information you require, then all you need to get from your legacy clients is the other half of the information. If they are low-risk clients, that is. If they are high-risk clients, you've got to do a full customer due diligence. Now, when we're talking about legacy clients, we're not talking about your buyers really or your sellers. We're talking primarily, I would imagine, about your rentals. Because if you have already got a buyer in tow, you haven't Fica'd him anyway because you haven't sold him anything. So it's not going to impact on you one little bit. And same with a tenant. If you've got a tenant that you're trying to find a rental property for, until he says, I want that property, I want to rent that property, you don't need to Fica him. It's going to be no different with this now. How many of you got a good rental book at admin?
Well, we did the commercial stuff, which is
Small.
Yeah.
All small, I think everyone's.
Yeah. Well, the big commercial industrial companies are going to have a field day. Now, it's okay doing business with someone. How do you terminate that business? The risk officer, if he is not happy with a client or a representative or a principal, he can terminate that business. But there's ways he has to do it. He must terminate where he feels a CDD cannot be conducted. If the guy's not giving you information, he must terminate that transaction straight away. If the employee gives the risk officer sufficient information, he must give him the client's name, why he feels he can't do his CDD, and the risk officer will then terminate that agreement. The risk officer will then tell the client, not the agent, the risk officer will then tell the client why we are terminating that transaction. And if you don't terminate when you know you should have terminated, it is a serious legal offence and criminal charges.
May I ask a question?
You may.
So I can already foresee that a lot of the agents are going to say, but at so-and-so agency they don't have to do this, and at so-and-so agency they don't have to do this. How are we going to handle that? Because we're obviously going to get a lot of pushback because this is rather onerous.
Same, it's just like answering any other objection. Give them the positive answer. Look, we don't run that company, we don't know, but we are following the law.
I was going to ask them to go work for that other agency. That was good.
No, turn it around. You want to work for some illegal option.
Yeah. You want to do something who operates illegally and faces go to jail? Go be our guest. But you're quite right, you are going to get those agents who always push back against it. But it's fine. You want to go and join the other company. Because we do things according to the law.
Will be coming online.
Well, my concern is that it's open to interpretation. So, as Gordon said, I've mulled over this for a very long time, but other companies may see a different interpretation. So, I'm wanting.
Well, I think the bigger companies are all going to take the same line as us. I mean, the slight thing might be a little bit different, but ultimately they're all going to try to do this in the best way that they possibly can. It's going to be the little mom and pop shops that are not even going to know that actually there's an impact, actually. So that's the one that's...
Yeah.
So our source of information has been the Robosa got this template for us, because the EAB hasn't put one out. So we've adapted it to our needs. I don't know what the other firms. I know the only other firm that I know of.
How can not have put one out?
Because they don't do anything.
They are useless.
We just pay them to do nothing.
Let's not get started on our favourite subject.
Yeah. So,
I know that Wakefields had training on it last week. Exactly the same thing, and they put out a similar document as this.
the only other firm I know of who haven't done it yet is Hop. So I haven't put anything out yet.
I know Max Rock have done theirs.
So, I don't know. As we said at the beginning, it may change. All the documentation will be on the documents tab on the management system.
Okay.
So you can look at it as a positive. If you quote the agents properly, it's just a situation that there's nothing completely over the top about it. It's just a situation where if you're talking to clients, there's a few little things when it gets to the selling and the buying part that gets a little bit like finicky and sticky. But the reality is you're actually proving that we're a bigger, better company by explaining this. And it's actually a nice tool to use rather than, like Kim says, if you've got some other agency who comes in and has got no clue about this, it's quite a nice selling tool to say, oh, you see, like you said, everyone in the estate agency would rather deal with bigger companies than the rubbish ones. So I don't think it's that bad. I think the agents might actually buy into it if you sell it properly.
You know, when Fica first came out, way back in 2001, whenever it was, everyone was going, ah! But then a new agent came in, we explained what Fica was, and they just carried on doing it as though it was part and parcel. It's only because it's changed, and this is going to happen 12 months from now. We're not even going to think twice about it. It's just we're going to put it part and parcel.
It is quite important to make sure that the agents are aware that you need to get somebody's ID, and you need to look at them, and you need to see that that is Lynn Roper and this is her ID, because I do think there are lots of dodgy things happening on a daily basis, and you don't want to end up in a situation where it comes back and you haven't done it.
Correct. You've got to do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The Estate Agency Affairs Board have acknowledged that they're behind, and they've said that they are going to go lenient on anyone they find who's not up to date properly until they themselves are up to date.
Which we found forever.
Okay, let's just finish this. We can go through the documentation. You get what is known as foreign prominent public officials and domestic prominent important people.
Are you a FPPO or a DPRP?
Well, this is what you've got to ascertain. This is what you've got to ask every single person, and that's what's on the questionnaire. You've got to ask it. Now, the reason I've done this in red, it's probably highly unlikely that you're going to get one of these people walking into the Berea or Westville or Umhlanga and saying, I want to buy a flat.
I think the only person that's at risk is Kerry. They're going to buy in Zimbabwe, Kerry.
Anyway, you've got to do your normal customer due diligence. Now, before you take or capture the data for these people, you've got to get hold of your compliance officer or your risk officer and say, can I onboard this data? You've got to establish their source of wealth. Now, this is, I laughed at this one.
I was going to say, interesting if you get Julius Malema and you ask him where there's wealth from.
Yeah. And then the risk officer has to closely monitor that business relationship. So that's a foreign prominent. Right, now who are these FPPOs? Heads of state, members of a royal family.
So when Queen Elizabeth comes to
Gets most of it.
Members of the cabinet, senior members of any political party, senior judicial officers, senior executives of state-operated enterprises or state-owned enterprises, high-ranking military officers. And for domestic, I've only put a few of the domestic on, it's about 3 or 4 pages. President or the deputy president, cabinet minister or the deputy, the premier of a province, a member of a provincial executive, mayor or political leaders, members of a royal family, chief financial officers of national or provincial departments, and so the list goes on. Now I repeat, I very much doubt we're ever going to get those, but they're there, and you've got the documentation
We had
to...
those in Devon North and Umhlanga. People from political parties that have come in.
Are they prominent people?
Zuma's wives own some properties in Umhlanga.
Okay, then he would now be treated as a DPIP.
high risk, Kerry.
Very high risk, it's Zuma.
Yeah.
Now, Fica love their...
Ask him ask whoever's buying it on his behalf, where's the funds coming from? That could be an interesting conversation.
If you asked him, he would say, it's from you. It's your tax on this thing.
You can tell them your government has put this law in place, so I'm following the law.
So you're surely familiar with the procedures. I don't have to explain.
Yeah.
Right, Fica records. Fica love their records, as you know. We still have to keep them. You have to keep the name of the client as per normal, how the name was established, which documents you used to verify that, the name of the employee, the currency involved in the transaction, the date the transaction took place and the date the verification took place, the parties involved in the transaction, the nature, and all correspondence related to that transaction must be included in the file. Now, as before, you keep them for 5 years. Again, they must be readily retrievable. There must be protection against unauthorised access, which is a bit new. And you now have to keep backup records. In the past, you did not have to keep a backup record, but this time you have to keep a backup record. And the copies of the documentation must be stored totally separate from the originals. Now, obviously, the easiest way to keep your backup records is going to be digitally. So you just scan everything in and keep it in the cloud or off-site somewhere.
So now you've got to keep 2 copies,
the original and 1 copy.
We already do that. We've got the file, that's our original file, everything's in that file, and then Risha scans everything and has got a separate file on her computer for the same file. So we've already got 2 of everything.
Okay, now let me ask you, Risha, what happens if your computer gets stolen?
She's got it
I do
back.
backups.
You've got backups? Where?
And passwords consented. When you go into your computer, is there a password?
And where do you keep your backup?
On hard drive.
Yeah, it's an external there.
Where do you keep it?
I keep it with me.
With you all the time?
Yes.
Okay.
And is this effective?
Good answer.
So it's not in the drawer of your desk when your laptop on top of the desk? No.
And if it's in the cloud, if you're on Google and it's in the cloud?
That's in the cloud, you can keep it in the cloud, yeah, no problem.
And only from the 1st of April, we don't have to back up the last
No, everything from the 1st of April.
I have put a covering page for your files, so you, the risk officers can tick off everything.
Is it in here?
No, it's a separate document, but if the administrators find that I've left something off, the risk officers, you can let me know. So I try to be as comprehensive. It's like a little summary of everything I'm in there.
You must have like a master file.
We need 10 master files.
You've got all the documents here, most of them. Right, let's just move on. Reportable information. What do you need to report to Fica? Well, this is virtually no different than it's already been. If you suspect that you are receiving the proceeds of crime, prostitution, drug money, trafficking, anything like that, you've got to report it. If you think it is regarding to the transfer of the proceeds of crime, report it. Someone is coming in with abnormally large sums of money. On a 3-year lease, I'll pay the full year, 3-year lease in advance in cash. Report it. If you feel that they are doing it the way they're doing it to avoid that you don't need to report anything, report it. If you think it's tax evasion, you report it. If you've got any inkling that the money involved is associated with the financing of terrorism, you report it. If it's 25,000 or more in cash, you report it. Virtually the same as it was with the old Fica.
Who do you report it to?
Fica.
You know,
Online.
You've got that online Go email thing.
Okay, let's have a quick look at the document pack. I see that we've got a list of the definitions. I don't think there's anything in there that you can't read that we need to go through unless you want to look and ask anything. And this is where, if you look down the left-hand column of that page 11 there, this is where you've got the different definitions, the name of the client, the name of the principal, and the name of the representative, if those are applicable. I think you'll find that in the vast majority of cases, we are going to rip off the old Fica document off the back of our sale agreement, and we're going to put the new Fica document in.
Questionnaire.
Questionnaire, yeah.
The problem is that you need a questionnaire for the different type of person, so I don't know.
Well, I'm saying the vast majority of our clients are going to be low risk.
People.
So we just use a standard low risk form.
For a person.
For a person. If it's different or a company, we just swap it. Simple as that.
So I'll
You
change
want that form?
Yes. The questionnaire, I have got it. I haven't attached it. I'll update all the sale agreements. Do you want it attached to the sale agreement as a
Yes.
Very good idea.
The agents see the clients before analyzing.
So this is basically just telling you for each scenario what you know what to do.
Yeah, so you've got your...
And if it's low risk, you don't need to verify it, you just need to get the information. If it's high risk, you need to.
So most of ours are going to be
Low risk.
The first three here.
Gordon,
Yeah,
I have
well.
a question. The high risk and low risk clients, obviously an attorney will be appointed. The finance is not kept with the estate agency, it's not in our trust account. So if that client is buying a property cash and however they're paying the cash, the attorneys will have to make sure and ask those questions as well where that money is coming from.
Correct.
So as much as the estate agent's going to put all the questions in, and we're going to submit it to the attorneys, but the high risk and low risk, I think, depends on an attorney following that up with the buyer.
No. The low risk, majority of your clients, Sarah, are going to be low risk. Vast majority of them. Doesn't matter where the money's coming from. You'll source that money, and the attorney will source that money, and the bank, if necessary, will source that money.
Find out where it's coming
Yeah.
Yes, because if we have clients, they'll buy in 6 million, 3 million, which we've had.
Yeah.
Our agents get all the Fica that's required for their client, and I make sure that it's done with them. And they're very good with Fica. But the attorney calls for the deposits and the cash.
Correct.
So as much as they're going to ask the questions, it's going to...
They'll have to answer it twice. The agent's still going to find out where's that 6 million coming from.
Even though it's been held by the attorney, they need to ask where it's coming from.
You have to verify. Source of funds.
Well, low risk, we don't need to verify, we just need to ask.
And if you've got 5 bar in your bank account from business proceeds, does a letter from the bank saying I have 5 bar in my account count as a source of funds? Or do you have to prove back to how you made that money?
How you made that money, yeah. So the bank would have to say it's in a business account from business proceeds. Because the bank will know when money's coming in from invoices. Sorry?
Yeah, I was going to say the bank's not necessarily going to know where you made that money from.
Yeah.
No, but the money, they'll see the money coming in. For example, it will come in from XYZ construction, it will come in from Mrs. Jones who you just built a house for. Coming from normal business transactions.
But is the bank, Gordon, the bank's not going to give a letter to an estate agency regarding where the client's funds have come from?
Yes, they will.
To their client.
The client asks for it, then it's fine.
Does the mortgage originator also have to Fica their clients?
No,
Are there an accountant wants to do
no, banks are. Mortgage originators aren't. That's not to be corrected unless they've changed it.
I think they are.
We think the ones
I think they are. Accountable.
exactly.
Since when?
Since ages.
financial services provider?
Yeah, they get all the bank statements from
See, they are a financial services
I
provider.
suppose they are actually.
Yes.
What if the risk officer is from the 1st of April, is on leave or whatever the case might be, and not available, what happens then? Do you have to appoint somebody else as a second risk officer?
No, there's nothing in the legislation says that, but automatically you will say, look, I'm going away, Joe's going to take over, or Mary's going to
But
take
you have to
over.
put that in writing.
I would imagine so, yeah. And they will have to accept. There's always got to be some responsible person in management.
Nobody in your office wants to
Close your office.
chat. If I go away for leave for a week and nobody wants to be risk officer, what
They
happens?
can't operate.
Close your doors.
Okay.
You
No.
go-
You can always appoint someone. I mean, it doesn't have to be a member of your management team to be your risk officer. Could be one of your admin people.
If she accepts.
And where would you be my risk officer, please?
Every person has their cross.
Questions? Well, look,
I think we've been asking them as we've gone along, so I feel like it's...
as we learn more, we'll keep you updated. And once they're board, if the board ever do their template, we can compare theirs with ours and make any adjustments or amendments.
Gordon, I'm the risk officer. Now, how do I I send myself a letter to say to you, you've got to do it in writing.
Yes, no, but you appointed from your company who owns the business, so do you own it in your own personal capacity?
Yeah, but even so.
Mark and the CC.
Yeah, the CC then appoints successfully to be the.
And then you and Mark sign it on behalf of the CC.
But you're the sole member of the CC, it's automatic.
Yeah.
There's no one else.
No, I'm doing 50-50, so.
In that case, the CC would have to give you
Page 21.
a position and you'd have to accept it. Anything else? Well, look, we're on the end of telephones. If you come across anything, you can either give me or Heather a ring.
Will we get those forms attached to the salary agreement before the 1st of April?
Yes.
And it's very apt to start it on April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
The document